Here's a few ideas on how to use media to comment on important social issues. A few weeks ago, the YouTuber Sam Pepper uploaded a prank video where he pinched the butts of seemingly unsuspecting women in public. Many people, myself included, were upset by it. And then a few days later, he uploaded another video with the same premise, except now a female host groping men. Many people were upset by this video too. And then a couple days after that, Sam uploaded a third video where he explained that the whole thing was a social experiment, that the participants were actors, and he intended to highlight the differing reactions to the sexual assault of women versus men. None of those three videos are on YouTube anymore. This video that you're watching right now isn't really about Sam Pepper, but even in their absence, his videos do provide great context for the idea of using media to comment on serious social issues, which is what this video is about. However, while we're talking about this, there are two things that are important to keep in mind if you don't already keep these things in your mind. One, I'm gonna talk about how media can be hurtful. That is not the same thing as encouraging censorship. Expecting moral standards from media creators is not the same as preventing them from creating or distributing media. Free speech is not some magical incantation that allows you to say whatever you want free of consequence. Furthermore, when media is removed from a website because it violates community guidelines, that is not censorship. It is a perfectly common and legal action supported by the terms of service every user agrees to when they sign up for basically any website, including YouTube. I get it, you don't like it, that's fine, but that doesn't make it censorship. You are not prevented from distributing that media in lots of other places. And two, if you find conversations about the potentially negative impacts of media to be silly because there are more threatening things out there, then why would you let ISIS, cancer, or the new Pierce Brosnan film top that list? By this logic that the bigger threat is always more important, shouldn't we all agree to stop worrying about literally everything except for the end of the universe? Okay, now, on to the matter at hand. Let's say a media creator identifies a particularly troublesome social issue like racism, sexism, or assault that they want to comment on, ideally with the goal of showing that it is bad. There are all sorts of ways to do that. You can report on it, create infographics, write a novel or performance, make music or humor, which we're gonna talk more about later. The avenues are basically endless, but no matter what you choose as your medium, simply showing assault or any villainous activity in media does not automatically generate criticism or commentary. This is true even if the person who's carrying out the activity is established as being bad or just kidding. Criticism isn't generated if the victim is clearly upset or hurt, or if the setting is one where we commonly understand bad stuff to take place. In other words, the portrayal of any heinous act as we collectively understand it to take place in the world is not criticism. It's something called reproduction. For example, if we see Tony Soprano kill a man because he is late to pay back a loan, and we collectively understand that when you are late to pay back a gangster, you are killed, and then cut to black, no criticism has been generated. We have simply reproduced a situation that we understand to possibly exist in the world. Reproduction shows, for example, that violence is in the world perpetrated by these people in these places, with no follow-up. Criticism, on the other hand, shows heinous acts as being heinous in an attempt to stigmatize and or eradicate them. This can be done a million ways. The Daily Show and Stephen Colbert do it through sarcasm and irony. The Onion does it through satire. Many movies and TV shows do it by showing the terrible consequences of engaging in heinous acts. Reproduction is avoided when commentary is provided in the same context as the portrayal of the thing that is being criticized. Daily Show correspondents, for instance, don't simply pretend to be racist and then after stepping out of character or changing costume say, the following is a list of reasons why racism is bad. The Wire doesn't show a bunch of successful, organized criminals and then at the end run a slate that says, even though in certain communities it seems like upward class mobility is only possible by adopting a life of crime, doing so is no less morally fraught at best and literally destructive at worst. Rather, it is during and with the portrayals of racism and crime that those very things are criticized. When creators decouple their portrayal of a social ill from their criticism of it, they reproduce bad stuff first so that they can comment on it later. Now, even in service of eventual criticism, reproduction isn't awesome because it can make bad stuff seem normal, if only for the amount of time between reproduction and criticism. If while showing racism, for instance, a creator jokes around and in no way confronts its badness because they're saving that confrontation for later or for another video, they very clearly communicate that racism is funny or normal. Maybe just for a moment, but as anyone who makes anything for an audience understands, every moment with your audience matters. As a consequence, the experiences of the people in the audience who have dealt with racism, sexism, or assault, either directly or indirectly, are diminished. These people are effectively told the terrible thing that happened to you is funny or normal to me. If the criticism comes after the reproduction, the audience is made to feel a certain way, and then later they're told that that feeling was wrong. This can come across as bad or manipulative storytelling, or just plain old dishonesty and disrespect. Either way, it's not a nice thing to do to your audience. Reproduction is also self-perpetuating. It communicates that if other people were to similarly reproduce bad stuff, it would be similarly funny or normal, and would maybe even gain them millions of fans. Now, before you get your angry letter-writing quills all dipped in righteous ink, let me make a thing clear. I'm not saying that showing bad stuff makes people do bad stuff.
Fun to do bad things.
Rather, I'm saying that the reproduction of social ills sends the message that they are certain or circumstantially acceptable, that they are the result of some inherent or natural quality of culture, and that there are contexts where they can be viewed as right or expected. I believe that sending this message is potentially damaging. There is a very, very, very large divide between saying media causes people to do X, and when X occurs, we think of it as normal or inevitable for all kinds of reasons, one of them being its frequent reproduction in media. I'm talking about the latter. Portraying a criticism-free situation where harassment is shown to be okay or funny implicitly reinforces the idea that there exists out there in the world situations where harassment is okay or funny. Now, at this point, you might be wondering if I'm saying we should never be allowed to make jokes about stuff that is bad. Bad stuff is serious, and serious stuff needs to be treated like it's serious. I'm not. I'm very solidly of the opinion that we should be able to tell jokes about all of our worst and most serious social ills. I realize that this is a very unpopular opinion on certain corners of the internet, but I will stand by the utility of laughter as a healing method and a tool to show audiences just how awful the world can really be. However, and man, this is a big however, it takes incredible skill as a joke teller of any sort to do this responsibly. Because what one must do is not only make an audience laugh, but make them laugh at something that is framed as being clearly reprehensible. Those are two opposite things. This is so hard to do that Louis C.K., one of the most famous comics and someone who is frequently so great at it, still gets himself into trouble when he doesn't properly contextualize jokes about sensitive subjects. This tension is so hard to manage that, depending upon who you ask at least, it's exactly what caused Dave Chappelle to leave show business entirely. Media, and comedy specifically, can be powerful tools for criticism, but you know what they say, with great power comes great risk of being just a huge jerk, so, just try to be considerate, yeah? It's just that easy. And apparently also very, very complicated. Now, in the interest of continuing this conversation, instead of responding to hot sauce comments, which will be at the end of next week's video, I'm gonna respond to a very small selection of comments that were left on our first, much shorter video that was explicitly about Sam Pepper. Fullphaser and Bacon write comments questioning whether or not it is appropriate for Idea Channel to be talking about these things. Bacon even asks whether or not it is our place. And I mean, I joke a lot about the internet being my hometown. It is almost certainly my workplace. I have lots of friends on the internet, lots of very important relationships and communities that I belong to, and I think when something bad happens in your hometown or your workplace, especially if you have a platform, it is almost your responsibility to use it to talk about those things. We always try to be positive and thoughtful, but when there are things that are important and potentially hurtful or damaging to the community, I feel like we have to talk about them. And that's true for things like this, things like net neutrality, and insofar as anybody might think that it is not Idea Channel's place to talk about those things, I'm gonna kind of make it our place, and I'm not gonna back down from that. But we're gonna try, like always, to do it responsibly and thoughtfully. We're gonna try. Arian, him, and a bunch of other people bring up the idea of intention when creating media, and that if the creator has a certain intention, they are sort of absolved from their audience misreading the thing that they made. And I think that if you are of that mind when it comes to consuming media, that is not a bad thing, but it also does not protect the creator from the consequences of the feelings of their audience. That if they intend to tell one story but their audience receives another story, that's a disconnect in the relationship between creator and audience. And when you create things, right, you are sort of beholden to the responsibilities of that relationship. And it's a very, very complicated thing. It's very fraught. It is not even. It can seem very unfair in certain cases, and this is why telling stories and making points is very hard. Jettania makes some prescriptions about how one could engage in this kind of social experiment activity and make it a little bit clear. And this is, I think, another really big question is, how could this have been done better? Me and the Idea Channel team talked about this a lot, actually. I have some base level concerns with the man on the street social experiment construct to begin with, but while talking about it, we had a very hard time figuring out how you could have all of these elements of prank, man on the street, and funny, and sexual assault, and not make something where the fundamental nature of the video is compromised. Which is to say, it suddenly, or it very quickly, becomes not comedy. It becomes something that is performance, or intervention, or, happening, whatever you want to call it. If you look at people like the model Pranksters, the way that they set up their videos, they make it very clear. Here, we should just watch a clip from one of their videos.
What would you do if you saw a homeless person getting robbed right in front of your face? We took this idea to the streets of New York City. Dylan's the homeless guy. These are the robbers. Let's see what reactions we get.
When the model Pranksters start a video, they're very clear about what the parameters are, who the players are, what their roles are, and what the context is. And I think that if you were to try to do that to a video of a similar stripe about sexual assault, it would very quickly become not a prank video. In order to do this kind of thing responsibly, it's very, very hard to do it, like we talked about in this video, with humor. So that being said, the closest thing we could figure out as being a way to do this and retain the humor is a bit that The Daily Show did about the way American universities have been mishandling sexual assault cases and the differing norms for being a man at a party and for being a woman at a party. And it is not a man on the street type of video. It's not a prank. But it does very clearly highlight the differing situations that men and women have to go through with regards to sexual assault, and it's very funny.
This is a big one, guys. Don't pass out on the couch. Someone might draw like a dick on your face.
Yes. Do not pass out on the couch, ladies. Someone will put their dick on your face at a minimum.
Actually, I meant, you know what? Never mind.
So we'll put links to the Daily Show bit and the Model Pranksters video in the doobly-doo. And, we talked about it a lot, and the conclusion might be that doing a sort of pure social experiment prank video about sexual assault might not be possible. As a creator, one of the things that you have to deal with is figuring out the best format for the message that you're trying to send, and those two things just might not be compatible. That being said, I am not a comedy writer, so, if someone has insight that they love to share, I would love to hear it. But yeah, it's a very difficult thing to talk about in this way. So I know we did the comments a little bit differently, but I still really want to know what you guys think about this situation and about the use. How do you use media responsibly to talk about important social issues? So there was a lot to cover, but any reactions that you have, would love to hear them. So let us know in the comments.